Hello, I'm Louisa, and this is my mom, Margie Longshore. Today, we're talking about how parents can help their kids process trauma with Barbara Fairfield.
Barbara is a licensed marriage and family therapist. In 1977, she got her degree from Bowie State University. She's been practicing with parents and children and dealing with difficult issues ever since. She leads three therapy groups. She also leads a group of working with genetic counselors at Johns Hopkins University Hospital. She's been working with couples and helping them deal with really challenging issues, and also is an expert in dealing with helping people deal with trauma. She's going to share with us today, and we're excited to be able to bring this to you.
Yeah, this topic of especially when the news is just so bad and how it's continued to just be bad can be really scary. And I realized from talking with different people that I've been trying to avoid it. And Barbara's message is talking about it and thinking about it, because that helps you process it. And you need to be able to process it to understand how to think about it. And so I really appreciated her words of wisdom on that.
Good. Thanks, Louisa, because your willingness to share that things that are going on in the world affect you is one of the main messages that I want to get across to parents, that all of us are traumatized by what we've been hearing lately, and our children are no exception. And our children either are hearing and therefore traumatized by what they're hearing, or they will soon hear. So we're not going to be able to shelter our children from the reality of the world. And so, I think your sharing about that this has been affecting you is really helpful, because that's what I want to get across to parents, that avoiding it is not dealing with it. That we're all would prefer not to have to deal with any of these hard things, but we do. So, I wanted to start by just explaining what we know about the effect of trauma on the brain and our minds. So we don't know everything, of course. We only have a small amount of knowledge about how the brain functions. But what we do know about trauma is that trauma is experienced by two different memory systems. The one memory system is called the situationally accessible memory, or SAM. And that's all of the unconsciously processed information. Things like how my gut feels when I hear that children were murdered in Texas. What I saw visually on the internet at that time. What struck me about what I saw, what I felt in terms of feelings or emotional states or reactions internally, and any physical feelings that I had. All of that is the situationally accessible memory, which is unconscious and not remembered. Then there is the verbally accessible memory, which is what is remembered. So I remember that on Tuesday evening, I turned on the news and I heard about the shooting. So that's what I can process and what I can tell you. What did I hear? I heard this or I heard that. And then, and where was I when I was hearing that? Well, I was watching my television set. So I was in my home. So there's some things that are verbally accessible, but there's a lot that is not verbally accessible. And what we know about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is that the SAM memory, or the situationally accessible memory, has to be processed in order to avoid things like flashbacks or other effects of trauma, such that we are not functioning very well. Severe depression, for example, not being able to function better. So being able to move things from the situationally accessible memory into the verbally processed memory is the way to prevent the worst effects of trauma. And that's what we need to do for our children. So our children need to have this processing take place. And of course, who's going to do that? The parents. Parents are the frontline people for their children. It's not the counselors. It's not the therapists. We cannot see all the children, but every child has a parent or a caregiver of some kind. And it's these parents and caregivers that need to help children process the situationally accessible memory experiences of trauma so that they can be expressed and discussed and integrated. So integrating the whole trauma is going to prevent this more serious results of it, which might be flashbacks, nightmares, depression, things that can linger for years and not even appear right away, might appear years later. So, and affect all of our ability to go forward in life in a healthy way. So does that make sense to you, Louisa, when I'm talking about that, you know, some of what you experienced in hearing some of this probably still needs to be processed, right? And you've got a mother who can help you process it. And you're also an older young adult who can have friends help you process it. But with our children, younger children are completely dependent on the parents bringing this up. So a lot of times parents are afraid to bring up anything about trauma because they don't want to traumatize their children. And that's understandable. We don't want to create more problems. But this approach of saying, okay, I just won't bring it up and hope that everything will be fine is not a reasonable approach in today's time. All of our children are going to find out that children were murdered in Texas. They are either going to find out from their friends, they're going to find out by overhearing their parents, they're going to find out by hearing the TV going in the next room, they're going to find out from their own phones or their parents' phones that they used to do something else on, and they are going to get this information. So if they didn't hear it last week, what happened Tuesday a week ago, if they didn't hear it that day or the next day, they will hear it tomorrow or the next week. And every child who has been back in school has heard it. There is no way they went back to school and someone in their classroom didn't already know about it from their parents or whatever. And so they're hearing it from other people. So what is so important is for good parents to be processing this with them, because just leaving it to their own devices to figure out or to process with their friends is not going to get them very far. So I was thinking about what kinds of questions should parents ask? Okay, so what you don't want to do is to sit down and say, oh, I want to tell you that there were 19 children murdered last week. I mean, that's not going to be a very good startup, right? So we don't want to do that. But what we do want to do is to find out and help them describe what they know. So I think one of the first questions to ask a child is, what have you heard or what have your friends told you about something that was very bad that happened last week in a school? You need to make it specific, in a school, okay? So that they will, whatever they heard will get triggered so that they can talk about what happened. But I think some kind of general question like that, and your child is going to say, well, I heard there was a man with a gun or something. They'll tell you something that will give you the first bit of what they heard. And then you can ask very simple questions. When did you hear it? So the timeline, when did you hear that? Oh, I heard it yesterday when I went back to school. Or I heard it last night when I heard you and Dad talking. When did you hear it? Where were you when you heard it? Where were you? Get all the physical details out. That's the processing of the situationally accessible memory, bringing it into the verbal memory. So where were you when you heard it? What did you feel in your body when you heard that? Did you have any strange feelings or unusual feelings in your body? What was your first thought when you heard that information? What else were you thinking? How did you feel? And then when they give you their thoughts or their feelings, it's important for the parent to validate that. And it can be very simple. I can really understand how you would have thought that. I could have thought that too, or I did think that, or I felt that as well. So I know you weren't the only one who felt that. Validating their feelings and helping them to experience it as part of what is supposed to happen when you hear bad news. It is also possible that if you start this conversation, your child may express some feelings. They may start crying. Or they may say, don't talk about that, Mom, that kind of thing. So let's talk about those two possibilities. If they start crying, that is not a bad thing. They are just feeling the feelings. And for you to be able to hold the space for them to feel that way and to say, it's all right if you cry. This is really sad. And maybe you'll be crying too. I know just talking about it makes me tear up. So that's what's going to happen. There's nothing wrong with that. And for children to learn that it's okay for them to feel and for their parents to feel something at a deep level, that is going to be helpful for them. This is part of the processing, moving this into a place where it can be integrated into their life and part of something bigger. This is not the only trauma your children are ever going to experience. It probably isn't the only trauma they've already experienced. So they need to be able to see how to handle this emotionally as well. So just being okay with that. Now, if they say, I don't want to talk about this, we don't need to make them talk about it, all right? So you may want to say to them, all right, we don't have to talk about it right now, but I'd like to check back in with you later and see if we can talk about it then. So you kind of put them on notice that you're not going to just disappear and forget this. You're going to keep giving them opportunities. You might say something like, I know you don't want to talk about it right now, and you may not think it's even a good thing to talk about it, but I know that it's going to be helpful to you for you to talk about it. And so we will get back to it, but I'll honor that right now you want to have a break. So just kind of staying with the child at their pace and their level at what they're giving you to deal with and being respectful of that, but not avoiding it. So you're giving the child the message that difficult, bad things happen, and we're going to deal with them. In this family, we help each other deal with bad things. So to me, the overall goal here is to give the child the firm understanding that they are cared about and loved in this family. And part of caring about them is caring about what they have taken in, what has happened to them when they've heard bad things. So that we're not just going to pretend like nothing happened. We're going to take care of what we need to take care of, and we're here to take care of you. So you have to walk that fine line between pressuring them and respecting their need to take a break or their need to back off a little bit from it. But many children will welcome the chance to talk about it. It's the parents usually who don't want to talk about it. The child often does want to talk about it and is glad to have somebody saying it's all right to do that. The other thing you can ask them is, what do you think your friends were feeling? Or what do you think your friends are experiencing? It's often easier for children to talk about somebody else than it is to talk about themselves. So did you notice anything about your friends? What do you think they were experiencing? Do you think your friends know this happened? Do you think they're having conversations with their parents? These are all good questions to ask them. Would you want your friend to be able to talk to their parents about this like you're talking with me? And then you can always end with, what questions do you have? Any of your questions, I will try my best to answer. I might not know the answers to all your questions, but together we'll try to find out what the answers are, so that you open it up to their real questions. And, depending on their age and sophistication, they will have some hard questions for you, some of them. And you may not be able to answer them. And it's all right to say, I don't know how to answer that question yet. Would you mind if I thought about it a while and get back to you? So don't feel like you have to answer every question right then. I mean, they're going to ask some questions that you probably don't know how to answer, or how to answer your child about it. You might have an answer for yourself, but you're not necessarily sure that that's the answer you want to give as a parent. So it's all right to take time for that. So
Barbara, this is so helpful. One thing that's coming up for me as you're saying it, and I'm thinking about myself as a parent and having these conversations, it's really tempting to want to make it better, like to want to fix it somehow so that they don't have hard feelings, to let them go to bed with a smile on their face. Like, it's just so hard, and you don't know how to do that, right? And I feel like it's tempting to just over talk and sort of process out loud in an over talky way. As a parent, we tend to talk a lot and listen a little less. And just
that's
wondering
right.
if, I loved what you said about validating. I wondered if you could just talk a little more about how to do that, or how to talk to ourselves so that we don't try to get caught up in trying to fix it.
Well, the first thing and this is kind of true for us as therapists, we have to learn how to do this. The first thing is just repeat what they said. If they say, I was scared, then just repeat that. So you were scared when you heard this, okay? And then ask some follow-up questions about it. So when you were scared, where did you feel it in your body? What did it feel like in your body? Sometimes they can describe it. Then if they can't, you could say, well, I know when I get scared, it feels like I have a ball in my stomach that's really hard. So, or I have a pain in my neck. You give them a little bit of a clue of how to check in with their bodies, because maybe they've never been asked a question like that. Where did you feel it in your body? So I think the important thing, I think that you're making the point, which is so important, Margie, is this is not something to tell your children, but something to get from your children. You do not have any answers for them, really. And so it's better for you to just see what they are dealing with and repeat back what you heard and ask some more questions of them. The purpose is to get them to process this. And they don't process when you are telling them what you think. Most of us parents finally learned that along the way, that when we tell our children what we think, they're not listening anyway. So yeah, listen. That's one of the main things about this process, I think, right? I was thinking too, Margie, that the other thing you can do, especially with smaller children, is ask them to draw their experience. Here's a piece of paper, here's some markers. Draw what you think when you think about this awful thing that happened. And that way you've got something to look at together. And it also gets it out of the right brain into the left brain, because the right brain does the drawing, but the left brain processes the drawing. So this would be another way to do this.
And you had said that SAM memory lives in the right brain. Is that right?
Yes, yes, exactly. So you've got to do things that process it to get it into the left brain, the logical, verbal part of our brains. And then it can be integrated once it's there, dealt with.
Another thing that came up as I've been talking to other parents, some parents worry that all the attention on it seems to perpetuate it. There's this awful statistic that since the shootings last week, there have been 17 other shootings, mass shootings that have happened just in the week. And that it seems to create a thread. And I wondered if you had thoughts about what can help us break the cycle and in a way that we process that helps to break the cycle, not perpetuate it.
Well, I think that any person who does this kind of awful damage to other people has undealt with trauma. And so I think if we process trauma with our children, if we help them to learn healthy ways of talking about it and dealing with it. So I have some other things I want to suggest that families think about, not just what you do with your child, but to themselves, but what you do with your child for others. So I think putting some actions and saying this family doesn't just hear bad things. We try to help people when we hear bad things. So asking the child, what do you think there's something we should be doing to help the people, the families in Texas, or to help the other children in Texas who were in that school, but and whose friends died? Do you think there's something we should do? Should we send a card? Should we draw a picture for those children? Should we do something? Should we have a lemonade stand and make some money to send to families who are in need so that they don't have to worry about something? So I think we can get our children to think of it in terms of support for others. Are there children in your school that you think you need to reach out to? Do you ask the child that? Do you think there's somebody in your class that might be having a hard time with this? Is there something you can do to help them feel better? So I think ultimately prevention of this is a mental health issue. Okay, ultimately we have to have people who feel better about themselves and their community such that they would not do things like this. And that, that takes starting with our own family, to make our own family a kind of healthy place. So that would be the way I would see it. And I think anything you can do to get them to participate in some kind of, now, if you've got older children, when you start talking with this, they're going to start saying, well, shouldn't we, and then, fill in the blank. Shouldn't we do something about all the guns? Okay. And then you just put it right back to them. What do you think you could do? What do you think our family should do? Maybe our family should be writing the Congress and asking for laws to make this better. So again, if you've got a 12, 13, 14-year-old, you're going to be dealing with people who have real concern about this for their future and who have a stake in it and who understand to some extent how life works. So depending on the age of your children, you want to kind of harness that kind of, we can make a difference. That's part of, rather than just reassuring them, oh, you're going to be okay, oh, it's not going to happen to you. I think what really gives us a sense of safety is when we know we've got support for change. That's what really ultimately makes us feel better. So helping them harness what they need. You remember when the shootings happened in Parkland, remember how those students there organized, these teenagers, they organized and they've been continued to be successful in their organization. And that's what gave them a sense of hope and agency. So we want to give our children a sense of agency that way. I think that's part of how we also can deal with it as elders and parents, that we that things can get better.
Thanks, Barbara. I love that you were thinking about how to turn it so that there's a way that I can take my energy and put it into social interests, like how to make a difference for somebody else. Because then it gives it, those upset feelings have a bit of energy to them, and they allow us to put that energy out in a useful way and move it, which I think is a very powerful.
Well, it's also a way to let our children feel something special about being a part of this family. In this family, we talk about hard things. In this family, we make room for strong emotions. In this family, we help other people when they've been hurt. So you get there's a sense of purpose and support and courage that comes from being together in this family and being constructive, doing something in some kind of positive way. So it's not just papering it over. It's really getting real about what can we do. We can only do so much, but we can do something. And helping small children believe that they can do something is a very powerful message for them, because remember, trauma like this makes you feel hopeless and helpless and powerless. So if you can empower the child in the face of something big like this, you've given them something for the future. To me, when I work with families that have all kinds of different concerns and real problems at times. And what I find is that the family who does best, that realizes that they can take something that's really, really tough and use it to get to a better place. That doesn't mean bad things should happen to people, but bad things do happen. And the important thing is to not let it bring you down, and to help have a way to harness the resilience, the camaraderie, the connection, and the compassion for others. So this particular event, of course, brings a lot of opportunity for compassion, right? Just think of all the people there in that little town that are affected by this and what we need. Now, the other part of it too, I think, which is you have to think about this as a parent, but see, I think the shooter himself, we need to have compassion for, and how to help our children understand that some people are hurting so badly that they end up hurting others. And that's a really hard thing to understand. But I think children can understand that, because all of us who've raised children know and have seen our young children, toddlers, 3-year-olds, 5-year-olds, have seen them get really upset, and in their being really upset, try to hurt their brother or sister or somebody else. So I think children can understand this at a level of compassion as well. We don't, so we can say something like, we don't understand why this person did this, but we can be sure that they were suffering before they did it. So I think there's a lot to be explored here for parents to use this. So this is not a one-time talk with your child. As you can see, there's a lot that needs to be covered. And I think opening it up, like you need to see this as an ongoing process, and to let your child know, we're going to continue to talk about this, and you're going to continue to have feelings and thoughts about it. And I urge you to come back and let mom and dad know that you're thinking about these things, so that we can talk about it and decide ourselves as a family what we're going to be doing, what is the best thing for us to do. Because this is not a one-time, okay, you had the talk about it and it's over.
Yeah, I was just thinking about what you said with how when you have to have compassion for the people that have done the harmful things, and I was thinking how that can apply to like suicide, and when someone does suicide, to help better understand Why? Because that's something that's really hard to wrap your head around at times. And the thoughts that you raised with that are really applicable to dealing with when somebody kills themselves.
Yes. Yeah, that's really good to see. This is what I'm saying to Louisa, is you can't know what bad things are going to happen, but you can know that bad things will happen. And if you can harness some of the better parts of your nature to deal with the bad things, including compassion, cooperation, right? Self-comfort as well as comfort of others. These are really good. These are good things to have in your own repertoire of mental health. So Louisa, let me ask you, when you're hearing this, and you were admitting that you've had some kind of concerns as a result of hearing some of this bad stuff. When you're hearing this, what's coming to your mind about what will be helpful for you, or what you might need to do as a
Yeah.
young
Yeah, when I first read it, I love to keep up on the news, but whenever a bad thing happens, I all of a sudden have this distaste for reading the news because I don't want to hear anymore. I don't want to see the bad things, but I also have this need to figure out why. And so I was trying to avoid it. And this morning I realized I was doing that. My mom got the newspaper, and I think I even said, "Oh, how bad is the world today? Like how terrible is this right now?" And there was an article about the shooting, there was an article about people not having food, there was an article about another person dying, and it was just like, come on now, like it's just so hard to stomach all that and to process it. And I realized I really needed to just have compassion for myself and know that it's okay to feel sad, and it's okay to sit with those feelings for a minute and think, yeah, that stinks and that's terrible. And I'm not the only one feeling that way.
And it's also all right to limit your exposure. Okay, it's also all right to say, I'm not reading the newspaper today, or I'm not watching the news. But now, if you say, I'm not watching the news ever again, that is your trauma voice speaking. That is not you integrating it. Okay, but it's also all right to limit your exposure and to put some guardrails around this, and so to avoid re-traumatizing yourself. In the same way with our children, to say, okay, we're not going to put the news on every night, we'll watch it just on Sunday, or something like that, or to decide as a family, should we talk about this? When should we talk about this? That kind of thing. So, I think, and the other thing I wanted to mention, because this is another thought I had. So after you have this talk with your child the first time, be sure you have planned it in such a way that afterwards you do something that's totally different. You go outside and kick the soccer ball around. You go make cookies together. You need to have something that takes you into a different mind, okay? So that this can all process in an integrated way. So I just wanted to be sure and say that you don't want to do this right before bedtime. Please don't. It'd be better if you did it on a Saturday morning, where you had time then to go to the zoo afterwards or do something else. So think about when and where you're going to do it. The space is important too. Are we kind of on the couch where we can touch each other? Are we, or is my child across the room and I'm talking to them? We need to have contact. We need to be able to look each other in the eye. We need to be able to hug our children when they start to feel bad. And that's the other thing I want to tell you. Hugs heal the brain. So be sure you do lots of hugs before, during, and after you have this talk. Hugs itself will heal the brain. So that's, again, being able to do that. If your child starts to get emotional, just, put your arms around them and hug them and say, just breathe into my hug for a minute. Okay? You can do things like that to teach them how to calm and regulate their own brain and their own mind. So I see this as tremendous opportunity to help our children be less likely to be traumatized in the future. It's like use the trauma that is happening right now so that they learn how to deal with their own emotionality, they're going to be hit with stuff. They aren't always going to have you, but if you've done your work well, they will have the process. They will know what to do with it.
There's so much here. I just heard you say, in a way, it sounds like what you're saying is this is coming to us now to be handled.
Mhm.
And so that we can move forward together and we can process so that we're ready and we're able to move. It's like an opportunity in a way.
Right. This is life. Life is what it is. And you don't get a vote about what you have to deal with, but you do get a vote about whether you deal with it or not.
I also heard you use the word integration. Can you explain a little bit more about that?
So this processing of what is in the part of the brain that is the situational part and bringing it into the verbal part is the integration process. You're bringing stuff out of the unconscious, unaware part of your memory, and you're putting it into a place where then it can be discussed, talked about, a story can be told, it can be narrated, you can tell it to somebody else. All of that is the integration of it. So, and also the physical part, that's why I mentioned hugs, doing things that are positive in the midst of it helps to integrate that, helps to bring all that into a more constructive kind of part of our experience. This is all experiential, right? We're experiencing this, and then sort of whether or not you integrate, process the experience, or whether it just sits there.
I'm also noticing that when these really hard things happen, I'm just noticing for myself, I tend to maybe get a little quiet and maybe get a little reserved, you know? And so those moments where we're connecting, where we're doing something fun together, it can feel like you don't have the energy for that, you know, or the space. And I just loved that you shared after this to move into something. And I heard connection there. I heard like go outside and do something active, kick the ball, shoot some hoops, do
Right.
something together.
That's right.
Or go and bake something delicious, or just be together in a fun way. Go get
I wouldn't watch a movie.
right.
I'd want to do something out in nature or in the kitchen or something that really, again, that's going to help the integration of it because the whole body is taking all of this in. So do we understand how all this works? No, we do not understand how it all works. So when I say integration, it's in quotes because do I really know about this? No. This is just what I can know from what we understand about the brain. But it's all a pretty big mysterious process in reality. But I don't think we have to be victims of the fact that we don't know very much. We can use what we do know and take it forward. I would love to hear parents, you've got a family education center there, Margie. I would love to hear parents getting together after having these conversations with their children, then to get a parents group together to talk about what it was like doing that, what their experience was like, because they need to integrate this. Parents are being traumatized terribly by this, and it's a trauma to talk to your children about it. So I think it would be really good for parents to be able to process what they processed and to hear from each other the various experiences and ways and that they dealt with this, because my guess is that parents will come up with some pretty good ideas of how to handle various things. So if you put this out to your groups, I would be very, very interested in hearing from them. And I think this is the kind of thing that does need to be, parents need to give this information back to each other. This isn't something that only us people in the mental health field know anything about. I mean, what did I know about this before I didn't know very much. I've learned this from parents. I've learned this from working with parents more than I've learned it from books, more than I've learned it from workshops. I've learned it from parents themselves, what was helpful, what was not. So I think the parents are going to have a tremendous amount of knowledge and experience to share with each other and to be passed on. And that's what we really need. We need to hear how this works in real time.
I love that invitation. In fact, we're thinking of having a workshop in 2 weeks. And I'm wondering, as you say that, here's my thought, that we will share this video, give the assignment to take over the next week, to have a conversation, come to the workshop with your results. And maybe if we're really lucky, Barbara might show up, or she might hear it later and hear what we had to say and give some insights for us. So,
well, I would be very interested in what the parents have to say. I really would. And so I think that would be invaluable for themselves, but for them to share with other parents and other family education centers. So I think we can learn a lot more about family life from processing these kind of things. So it's another way also to think about this tragedy as something that has something within it that can be helpful, that can be useful, as awful as it is. And I am sure that every family of a child that was killed in that event hopes that something positive will come out of their child's death.
I just have to take a deep breath because everything that we've said is just so important, and it's so hard to hear it because you don't wish it was true.
That's right.
But it is.
Yeah, this is no way we want to have to learn, but this is the natural system. This is the natural system, is life itself hands us difficult things. And as human beings, we are not all that evolved yet. So we're going to keep having difficult things to deal with. So I wanted to give one reference, by the way, for families. There is what I found today. This is worth looking at. There is www.schoolcrisiscenter.org. It's worth going there. Schoolcrisiscenter.org. There's some nice, helpful things on that website. So that's the other thing. We need to sort of, share these things with each other and help everybody to know that there are people working on this, thinking about this, trying to see what to do next. The kind of final thing I wanted to say was about reassuring children. What we can't do is to reassure them that this is never going to happen to them. If we say that, we have no basis on which to say that. We have to reassure them instead that we are doing everything we can to keep them as safe as possible. And that adults are working to do that, are thinking about this, are trying from this experience to trying to find a better way to prevent this kind of tragedy in the future. So we can reassure them that we are determined to do our part in keeping them safe and in helping to keep other children safe as well. And I think if we broaden it to being all children, then that will help them to feel that the adults are on it, that they are trying to do something here. So, but
yeah.
So I think
I just wanted
parents want to say, oh, you're safe in this house. Well, we can't say that for sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to say another thing I forgot to mention earlier is I think kids, it's kind of like, it's always like there's this bringing it up to the surface whenever we have active shooter drills in school and how scary those can be. And I just wanted to know, do you have anything to say, like, especially because that's going to happen again, the kid's going to have to go through it. Is there anything a parent or like a teacher or caregiver should think about to really remind the kids when they have to go through that. Like they always say, this is just a drill. It'll be over. This is not the real thing. But it can still be really scary. And it can also be like people start laughing and giggling and it's like funny. And how do you find a balance there?
I don't think there is a balance. I think this is traumatizing to our children. To go through drills is traumatizing. I can still remember as a child of the 50s getting under my desk when we were told to do that in case a nuclear bomb hit. Okay, so I still have the memory of that. I know what it feels like as that little kid, 6 years old, crouched under my desk. So I think this is traumatizing to children, but it has to be done. And so again, processing it with our children and not just thinking that, oh, they had a drill and they're fine. It's like, I think the schools should let the parents know when they're doing these drills. Okay, so that the parent can at home say, oh, you went through that drill today. What was it like for you? How were you feeling? Process it. They're traumatized by the drills. And I suspect that the schools are not letting the parents know when they're doing it. But maybe they are, but because I'm not a parent of small children, so I don't know, but they should be. And parents should be handling this at home. So that is traumatizing too. It has to be done, but it is traumatizing for our children.
One of the hard things that keeps coming up for me is, as a parent, you want to try to always make something better. And going into this conversation, there's nothing I can do other than listen, be there with hugs, validate,
Right.
ask more questions. That's what you're saying. That's what I can do as a parent, right?
And that's not nothing. I'm saying that that is a lot to do and that a lot of children are not getting that. And our children need that. It is a lot to do. It doesn't feel like you're doing enough because you want to make it just all go away, but you cannot make it go away. This is the world that your children have been born into. And you can help them to be able to handle it. And they'll be able to handle it to the extent to which you help them to do that. And then they'll help the next generation.
I just wanted to say something like handling the news. I think it's really important not to hide the news and to just bring it in. One thing that I feel like I've heard a couple times is just have like, if you have like a newspaper or just have something that can draw it up naturally, because when you get told, Art, we got to talk about this now, that's really hard. And I really appreciated your giving space, but also setting a time to talk about these hard things. So that way we're able to process together.
Right. And listen to the child who says, I don't want to talk about it. It's like, okay, we don't have to talk about it right now, but we do need to talk about it sometime. So when can I get back to you? When can we do this again? So yeah, absolutely. Louisa, I really appreciate having a younger person's view of this as well, because this is your world that you're in. And I think this can help the parents to see that this has real salience for the future of their children. They may have 5-year-olds or 12-year-olds now, but they're not going to be 5 or 12 for that much longer. And you are here to, be a voice.
Yeah, I think I was telling my mom earlier that hearing about all these really sad things and hearing about people getting hurt, it becomes part of you, and you can't let that part go because there's always that fear that you might become that person. And so being able to talk about that fear is really important, because kids now, and I think I've heard other teenagers say this too, is that when they're in school or you're in a building, you kind of think about, all right, what would happen if this happened at my school? Or if there's a threat at your school, you're immediately thinking, what would I do? How would I be safe?
That's right.
Would I want to text my mom? Would I not want to text my mom? Like, what should I do?
Well, and parents also are doing the same thing, Louisa. They're thinking, I hope this doesn't happen to my child. But now this did happen. And so they're, also like their children. There's fear involved, real fear. So we need to be okay with that being the state of mind that we have. That's not being crazy. That's being human. Now, you do want to watch your children kind of over time. And if you do see a child who is not sleeping, having nightmares regularly, maybe getting really easily irritated that they weren't before, although a lot of our children were already throwing tantrums. But if they begin to do things out of the ordinary, then you may need to consider professional help or a professional evaluation for your child. But I think all of our children are going to have some suffering of this, and they're not all going to be helped by taking them to the doctor or the psychologist. And so we need to be able to help them in the context of our families first. And then if there is ongoing need, absolutely, the professionals need to step up, and we need to do our work here.
Yes, I so appreciate how you say, though, that parents are the front line and we need the skills. We need to be able to handle our job on the front line.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why coming to things that you're doing, Margie, and getting more skills involved, being able to talk to children about hard things and helping each other as parents, being a community of parents that helps each other. That's just vital, because every person is not going to get to have a therapist working with them, and every therapist is not equipped to deal with children. I don't see children. I see troubled couples. That's mainly who I work with. I do not usually see children. I know a lot about children because I've worked in a family education center and a hospital with genetics, where children have serious genetic disorders. So I have a lot of experience in it, but that's not my expertise.
I think quite a few people immediately go to how can we help solve this problem? Like activism. They go to that. And then I think another thing that happens is you just kind of get sad. And it's a lot of it's happened again.
Yeah.
It's happening again.
Right. But they don't necessarily realize that it's affecting their own brains, their own minds, and that they need to do something about that, because they won't be able to be that helpful for others if they
don't.
Yeah. Struggles.
I don't think we immediately go there yet. It takes time, and then you hear something like this, or you read something and you're like, I need to remember to take a minute and process it too. And that doesn't always happen right away.
Right. I understood. And the same for parents. I mean, parents need to be processing this with each other. We all need hugs. We need to process this. We've all been that's what I'm saying. Everybody's been traumatized by this. We are a nation of traumatic, mind mapping people right now who've been all traumatized. So we all need to be processing this in a healthy way, in some healthy way. So, but I'd be really interested in your age group, how that is for you, what you see.
Yeah. I'm about to be around a bunch of them, so I'll let you know.
Good. Great. Terrific. Okay, you two.
Thank you, Barbara. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Sure thing.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, very good.